Welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. It also goes out on my YouTube channel, as well as the Lilydale Assembly Facebook page and YouTube channel. So you got lots of places that you can view and enjoy this show each week. And I'm proud to say that this is year 8. I'm finishing up year 8 of episodes of Wednesdays with Willa. So you've got lots of past episodes that you can enjoy. I've had fantastic guests and wonderful topics throughout the years. Many people tell me that they binge watch it and consider it a treasure trove of education regarding spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, and more. And one of the things that I find so wonderful about the show is that I can interview people wherever they are all around the world. So if I have people from across the pond, as it were, and all throughout the United States and into Canada. And I encourage you to look back and know that you can always, if you have a favorite guest, especially if you're on my YouTube channel, you can type in their name and it will populate with all the different shows that they've been on with me in that case. So that's the best way to search, because Facebook, just to alert everyone, has changed how they do things. They are, after 1 month, they're dumping all live videos. So that we're in that transition of making sure everything's on YouTube instead, but also still doing this on Facebook Live. Other things I want to make sure I announce for you today: the Lilydale summer season starts on June 20th this year of 2025. It'll run for 10 weeks. You can find more about our daily events, the mediumship services, healing services, workshops, and more, all on lilydaleassembly.org. And I encourage you to get booked early. I'm booked for the summer season with clients already. So for me, you're going to have to wait till probably September and beyond. And I am also available for Zoom and phone readings. Check the list of Find a Medium on the lilydaleassembly.org website, and you can see the listing of all the registered mediums, and just go intuitively how you feel directed to connect with the medium and check their scheduling. Also, make sure you're getting your hotel and guest house reservations done, because many dates are very booked. I do want to mention there's a special event the weekend before Lilydale opens on the 13th of June. There'll be a special fun fest here with lots of vendors, and it's a wonderful pre-season event where you don't have to pay a gate fee to be here. So just know that it's wonderful to be able to be here in Lilydale, in this very special place that has been doing mediumship and healing for over 140 years. Also, I need to make sure that I announce I do have 2 live Zoom classes coming up on June 2nd and June 9th. The first is the Spiritual Experiences Q&A. People love to come and bring a question or just enjoy the discussion as I answer people's spiritual experience questions. You can find more about that on my website, willawhite.com. And then the following week, June 9th, I will be doing a guided spiritual assessment for developing mediums. So it's a guided exercise to help you connect with your spiritual team, but also your own soul, to help you understand what's next in your particular mediumship development. So all of that can be found on my website, willawhite.com. All right, without further ado, I would like to introduce onto the show our special guest today, Kevin Todeschi. Hello, Kevin.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited about our discussion today, and we're going to be focusing on the wisdom of Edgar Cayce. And for those of you who don't know who Kevin Todeschi is, he is a fabulous expert about Edgar Cayce. And the reason being is he's written so many books about Edgar Cayce. He's an author, and he worked for nearly 40 years before retiring as the executive director and CEO of the Edgar Cayce A.R.E. And he's a popular speaker. He's lectured on 6 continents to thousands of individuals. He's a prolific writer. He's an author of more than 25 books, including Edgar Cayce's ESP, Edgar Cayce on Soulmates and Soul Companions, the best dream book ever, Edgar Cayce on the Akashic Records, Reincarnation, Edgar Cayce, everything. So I know he's written other books as well. So you can find more about Kevin on his website, KevinTodeschi.com. And he is one of our summer season highlights for 2025. He'll be here in August, and I have linked in this post so that you can directly go to the Lilydale Assembly website for Kevin's classes to get registered, because I think you're really going to enjoy what he has to share with us today and what you can learn from him this summer. So without further ado, we'll launch into our discussion about the wisdom of Edgar Cayce.
Great.
It's exciting. You can tell I'm excited about this.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's an exciting topic. He certainly has done a lot for the spiritual community, and he's been a part of my life, actually, for 50 years next month in June. 50 years involvement with the Cayce material.
And it went just like that.
When I look back at those pictures, I think I could have never imagined 50 years could go that fast. But yeah.
So you've literally been steeped like good tea in Edgar Cayce.
I have, yeah, absolutely.
So just to give people an understanding, maybe they never heard the name Edgar Cayce. Who is Edgar Cayce?
Edgar Cayce is the most documented psychic of all time. He lived between 1877 and 1945. Through a series of, let's say, chance encounters or accidents, he discovered that he could put himself to sleep, be given the name and address of anyone anywhere in the world, tune into that person, describe what was wrong with them, how they could get well, and he could even give them the names of doctors to go and see if they needed help. And it was really about he started giving his first reading in 1901. It was actually his first reading was for himself. He had had a severe headache, and he had taken a medication for the headache, and he woke up with laryngitis. Well, at the time, he was a traveling salesperson. And pretty soon, if you're a traveling salesperson and you have laryngitis, you're out of a job. And the laryngitis persisted, and he went to various doctors and things and could not find any help. And after months of speaking just above a whisper, he finally got a job as a photographer. In fact, he'd go on to become a award-winning photographer. And about a year into his laryngitis, a local hypnotist came to town. He was in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And I guess some of his friends volunteered Cayce to go up on stage, and he reluctantly got up, and the hypnotist put him under. And while he was under hypnosis, he spoke normally. So some of his friends and a local doctor thought there's something here. So later on, the doctor asked Cayce to put himself to sleep like he did there on the stage. And he asked Cayce to describe what was wrong with him and how he get well. And he did just that. And that was March 31st, 1901. And that's what the organization considers the first reading. Well, Cayce was delighted. I mean, he had his voice back after they followed the treatment. He was ready to get on with his life. And the doctor had other ideas. He thought, you know what, if he can do this for himself, what if he can do it for other people? And so he began to give him the names of clients he was having a hard time with diagnosing. And every time, Cayce was able to do it. Well, within 9 years, this doctor, his name was Dr. Ketchum, wrote a paper for the Boston Medical Society, which was picked up by the New York Times with the headline, "A Farmer Boy Becomes Doctor When Hypnotized." And he wasn't really a farmer boy, and the article even said he was illiterate. He wasn't illiterate, but that made for a better headline. And from that time on, publicity around the country was about this guy who could put himself to sleep and diagnose any illness, outline treatment. And from, I would say, up until 1923, he focused on physical cases. And then in 1923, a man who was interested in metaphysics, Arthur Lammers, asked him to do a horoscope reading. And during the course of that reading, Cayce mentioned that many of the same patterns in his life this time around were similar to when he had once been a monk. And that opened up the door to reincarnation. And so if you look at the readings in total, we have copies of about 14,400 of them. But early on, none of them were kept. But after Gladys Davis was hired as secretary, everything was kept. We got copies of 14,400. About 8,000 are about health, and almost 2,000 are about life readings, and then any other subject you can imagine. So people just like you and I went to Edgar Cayce and asked anything imaginable about their life, their relationships, their career, their future, you name it.
Yeah, it's fantastic, the breadth of his work and the way he was able to help so many people. I think, they call him the sleeping prophet because he would get into that trance state. And then all of this was well recorded and documented so
It
that
was.
people can go back and read and learn from some of the prescriptive things that he offered during
It
that
is.
time.
In fact, if you go to Casey's website, edgarcayce.org, there's a health database. And so if you have something like arthritis, you can type in arthritis, and it will give you a treatment overview of what Casey gave, or the common cold, or baldness, or whatever it might be. There's 400 common health issues that you can just look at and see what Casey gave as the overall treatment.
Yeah, so as an alternative to actually typing into Google and trying to be your own little doctor that way,
You can go to the Casey
this.
Health Database. Exactly.
Yeah,
And
I think that's.
I was just going to say, I tell audiences, today we can explore the Casey material in ways that even when people were alive and got readings from Edgar Cayce, they couldn't explore. They were all kept in, a file cabinets. The only readings that were made available were the one that was your own. Later on, they got wise and they hired a woman who would go through the readings looking for answers to questions and then provide them to the person who had the question. But today you can put in any topic, any issue, any date, any period in history, and there's information from the readings that can come forward. So we can explore that material in ways that Casey probably never dreamed of.
How impressive. And what a beautiful resource for others. And not that everything is universal or generically able to be had that way, but how beautiful that because he was able to do this for years and years and years, he probably hit almost every illness known to man.
Yeah, I mean, they've estimated that Casey talks about 10,000 different topics in all those readings he gave. So it's an amazing overview. And that's why, I've spent a lifetime, 50 years looking at the material. And I tell people that even, I would say maybe 7 years ago, I came across a topic I had never really seen before. And that's Casey talking about the illusion of time. And so I got really involved in that for a long time. So no matter what it is, whether it's dreams or psychic ability, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about at Lilydale, or relationships, or your reincarnation, or your health, or massage. I used to get it. They have a health center there at A.R.E. I used to get a massage once a month there at the health center. It's just an amazing place.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful that it's a tribute to Edgar Cayce, but it's something that is helping the world sustain in a particular way.
Absolutely.
And inspiration for others, so that we do need these healing locations that have the knowledge. It's like having the Alexandria Library, right? only for the purpose of the spiritual dynamics, the amazing insight and wisdom that Edgar Cayce was able to offer. And just for people who again are not as familiar with Edgar Cayce, within the scope of this, he helped the everyday person, and he also would help people who were perhaps more well-known and throughout the world that would approach him or write to him. But typically this is something he eventually did through the mail, right? Isn't that right?
The mail or telegram, or people coming to Virginia Beach. I mean, at the time, once this article in the New York Times came out, I mean, people would write to him for help. A lot of it was mail. And what would happen is he'd put himself to sleep. He would describe what was wrong with them and how they could get well. And at the time, he was, this was a very much a meat and potatoes society. Casey would talk about the need for a change in diet, the need for a change in exercise, healing a relationship, some treatments that were quite uncommon at the time. Early on, for example, there was a very heavy-set construction worker named George Klingensmith. He weighed over 300 pounds, and he had tripped into a ditch at a construction site, and he had crushed his knee bone. And this is around I'm going to guess around 1907, 1908. And doctors told him his knee was so badly damaged that he would never walk again. He'd be confined to a wheelchair. Well, this Dr. Ketchum got a reading for Mr. Klingensmith, and Cayce recommended taking several nails from the construction site, thin nails, and nailing the bone back in place, describing how to do that so he could walk again. Well, Klingensmith thought this was very unusual, and the doctor thought it was unusual, but they agreed to try because he was faced with never walking again. And they did, and he was able to walk eventually. And so even though today we would know that as pinning a bone in place, at the time it was unheard of. So Casey's issue was that he'd give a reading, and people would go to their doctor and they'd say, this man I never met fell asleep on the couch. He lives on the other side of the country, and he described what's wrong with me, and here's what I'm supposed to do about it. And sometimes doctors were real hesitant to, carry out some of those treatments. So Casey's dream was to build a hospital where he would hire regular doctors, therapists, physiotherapists, nurses, dietitians. He would give the readings, and they would carry out all that information. And finally, after years, the hospital was built in 1927, and it operated for a few years. And then the Great Depression, basically, he lost the property, and his dream was short-lived. But A.R.E. managed through his son to buy that hospital building back in 1956. And ever since then, it's been our headquarters, one of the buildings on our site for our headquarters. So.
Oh, wow. At least part of that aspiration has come to pass.
Right. And we renovated the whole building when I was CEO. One of the things I want to do is renovate the hospital into a top class spa. And so there you can go there for a steam, a massage, if you're really brave, a colonic. I mean, anything. You can see an osteopathic, chiropractor. Yeah.
Wonderful. And do you feel that down the road they'll be able to offer what Casey was able to?
I think that there's so many. I mean, yes, if you're asking me, do we have intuitives that work with us that we can refer people to?
Yes.
If you come to the lobby and say, do you have the list of psychics that they, at least under my tenure, we did have a list of psychics we pass out. You can get references to a psychic, and they also have psychics that come to our bookstore and give readings. But I'm not sure we're going to have a psychic who oversees a group of physicians, because now medicine has grown so exponentially. It would probably not ever be financially feasible to have a top-notch medical facility run by a psychic in Virginia Beach.
Right. I mean, yes, because they're not Edgar Cayce.
Well, he actually, one of the things I'm going to be talking about at Lilydale is he suggested that each one of us is our own best psychic. And I had been traveling around, like you said, 6 continents. I've been everywhere but Antarctica. No penguin wants to hear what I have to say, but everywhere but Antarctica. And Casey said repeatedly, each of us is our own best psychic, and gave a number of ways to get psychic guidance. And very often I'd be speaking to A.R.E. audiences, and I was surprised at how few people are actually doing anything psychic in their own lives. So I've come up with a whole list of things people can do. And for years here in Virginia Beach, we have 11 large high schools. And I would be invited in by a psychology class to do a dream program. And in the guise of that, I'd have them do a waking dream, close their eyes and imagine something, do a waking dream. What they really were doing was a psychic exercise, but I didn't want to say that because I wanted to get invited back. And at the end of every time, I'd say, how many people feel like they got an answer to their waking dream? And every hand would always go up. And basically, it's just facilitating psychic experiences. And people are amazed at how easy it can be. Just a little bit of try on your part will result in an answer for you.
I think that's beautiful. And it's something that I always encourage as well, is if we can tap into that ourselves and really consciously bring awareness to that beautiful link that we always have, that ability to access that becomes more easily had, but also having the guided experience. It's focusing your mind and your attention in a certain manner, in a deliberate, sacred fashion, to really bring out the light in a person. And I feel many people enjoy the guided experiences because Absolutely. It's like having someone hold their hand.
And the information is coming from them. Yeah, it comes from them, and they feel somehow more connected to it, or it has more meaning to them if someone else just tells them.
Yes.
What Casey gave about 900 readings on dream interpretation. So he was really big on dream interpretation at the time when perhaps only Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud were. And out of that information, it becomes very clear that we get insights from our dreams and from symbols. And kind of taking that, to a next level and working with intuition. This is more than 35 years ago. I was dating who's now my wife, the woman who's now my wife, and she was a professional psychic, and she was very good with helping other people, but she wasn't quite so good with helping herself because she felt so insecure about it, didn't know if she could get the right answers. And I remember this one occasion, we were out looking for a new car for her. She had an old Toyota, didn't even have air conditioning, which here in Virginia Beach would not be a good thing. And we were in the car dealership, and in the old days, before you could look up a car online and make your bid, the salesperson would come back and forth and say, oh, I need to go talk to the manager. And it was basically just a way to put pressure on you. And she found this Toyota that she really wanted, and a Corolla. She really wanted, but she kept saying, they're not going to give a part-time psychic a car, and I'll never get this. And she was really anxious. And I said, can't you just tune in and see what the results are? She said, no, I can't do it. I can't do it for myself. I said, let's play this game I've been working on. And basically what the game is use your imagination and symbolism to get an answer. So in my mind, I quickly thought, okay, we're going to imagine there's two options here. She gets the car, she doesn't get the car. So I'm going to imagine two doors. And behind one door, door number 2, I'll say, she gets a car. And behind door number 1, she doesn't get a car. So I said, Mary, I want you to close your eyes. And she said, okay. I said, I want you to see two doors. She said, okay. I said, describe door number 1. She said, it's a plain door. Remember, this is Mary doesn't get a car. It's a plain door. I said, what's behind it? Open the door and what's behind it? She said, it's like an old living room, 1950s furniture, old, not that great, which to me really described her present car, old, not that great. I said, go to the second door. What's it? I said, plain door. Open the door. Well, there's a party behind it. There's a lot of streamers, people having a celebration. There's a lot of things going on, very excitement. Well, in my mind, the door number 2, Mary gets the car. I said, Mary, you're getting the car. She said, how do you know? I said, because that's where the energy is. And the energy is right there. And she still wasn't quite sure until a few minutes later, the guy came in and said, okay, you get the car. So I think it's really easy to promote psychic experiences in people. They just don't always know how to do it. And so I've come up with lots of ways we can do it that makes, very insightful. We play lots of psychic games in my house here even now.
Well, having playfulness with it is an essential ingredient as far as I'm concerned. I'm always telling my students, if you bring that element of play to it, it becomes easy to access the information because you're not all clamped up. You're not in that space of the rational mind telling you that you can't.
And you don't worry about you getting it right. It's just about, I'm playing this little game. I'm just going to see what happens with my imagination. Exactly. And you empower yourself. And to me, that's really one of the things that's most helpful and most prominent throughout the Cayce readings, that regardless of the topic, we can empower ourselves. We can empower ourselves to help our own health. One of the reasons I really got committed to the Cayce information was I was severely impacted by allergies. I grew up in Colorado. I went to the University of Colorado. I used to get 6 allergy shots a week, 3 in one city and 3 in another. Allergy pills all the time. And I started working with the Cayce material on allergies, which is simply to alkaline your system, and then you can't have allergies, which sounds, too simple. And there was a product he recommended that was created in the late 1800s called glycothymoline. It's still on the market, glycothymoline. You can get it at Amazon. It's like $17 a bottle, and they advertise it as a mouthwash. But basically, it's the same product. And what you do is you take maybe a tablespoon or 2 and a half a glass of water, and you drink it every morning, and it alkalines your system immediately. And it does not say that on the bottle, and it's not FDA approved for that reason. But I did that, started doing that. I don't get shots anymore. I don't even take allergy pills anymore because it's an instant alkaliner. And it's simple things like that Cayce laid out for people to do, regardless of what it is. Health, dreams, remembering your past lives, working with psychic ability. And that's why I think the Cayce information is still so relevant today.
And that he made it accessible through sometimes more natural remedies, shall we say, but also, as you said, things that they can access and really start to be a true advocate of their own health, right, and in a partnership with it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the phrases he uses so often is we are co-creators in our life's unfoldment. We're not victims. We're co-creators. And the more we take that promise in hand, the more we can really have, a say in what's going on in our life. And the story I often tell people about when we're talking about challenging life experiences is our life is not created by what happens to us, but by how we choose to respond to what happens to us. So that two people can have the very same experience. Let's say they're both laid off, they're both fired, and one is miserable and unhappy and says, I worked there for 30 years. How could they do this to me? I'm going to be on unemployment as long as I can. I can't believe I hate those people. And the other person thinks, I didn't like that job anyway. Finally, I have a reason to go out and do what I really wanted. And they get inspired to do something else. And even though the experience is the same, the response is what creates the next phase of their life. And even the most horrendous experience that happens to someone, they can use it as a vehicle to help someone else with the very same experience, and they can transform their lives and the other person is in the process. So our life is really co-created by how we respond to the external world around us.
I couldn't agree more. That it's excellently explained. Yeah. And it's something that as spiritualists, we definitely believe and know to be the truth. When we're working with personal responsibility and we're really wanting to embrace that better, more spiritual reaction to the events, it does help if we keep our mode positive and know that the universe is constantly conspiring for our greater good. We have only to take hold of that with the right attitude, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, one of the other things that really inspired me early on about the readings was that Cayce basically said that we're wired for guidance in so many ways. And whether you want to do it through astrology or through psychic readings or through palmistry, or I really became gung-ho on dreams. And I'll tell this story, which I've told before on radio programs, that I was in a study group and we had maybe 14 people in the group. And it was a group that studied some of the spiritual principles in the Cayce material, like how to meditate, how to cooperate, all that kind of things. And I was maybe 15 to 30 years younger than everybody else in the group. And so I always felt like I was kind of catching up. And early on in this group's experience, they had this experience. The experience they did was where every 6 months we'd ask for a dream, everyone in the circle, 14, asking for the same dream. And then we would see what our experience with that dream was. And I had never done that before. I'd never asked for a dream. I didn't even know if I could remember a dream. And what the group decided on was we're going to work on the dream. What do I need to work on spiritually? And the idea was you write out that question, you read it before going to bed, and then you write down your dream and come back and we're going to talk about it with the group, and we'd all help each other figure out what they needed to work on spiritually. Well, although the idea appealed to me, I was still kind of nervous about remembering a dream. So that first night I wrote it down, woke up the next day, couldn't remember a thing, which gave me a little performance anxiety. So the next day I wrote it down again and again and again. I read it over and over and over again. And I folded up my little piece of paper and I tucked it in my undershorts to make sure it was with me all night. This is the dream I had. I dreamed I was in Egypt. I had never been in Egypt up to that point. Years since then, A.R.E does tours all over the world. So I've been to Egypt 6 times. But in the dream, I was in Egypt, never been before. And I was on an A.R.E tour. And there were about 50 people there with me on this A.R.E tour. And we were coming out of the Great Pyramid. If you've ever seen pictures of this big hole in the side of it, which was blown into it hundreds of years ago. But anyway, so I was standing right there at that hole coming out of the pyramid. And as I'm coming out of the pyramid, remember I've written out the question, what do I need to work on spiritually? I'm coming out of the pyramid and a group of people are gathering around and someone yells out in the crowd, by the way, Jesus taught Kevin some dance steps and Kevin wants to show them to you now. Well, I was kind of scared, nervous, horrified. I never remembered meeting Jesus. I sure didn't know anything about dancing. Well, all these people started gathering. They're sitting down in front of the Giza Plateau. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm a team player. Maybe I can come up with something. I'm thinking, what kind of a little soft shoe could I do here to show everybody? And as they're sitting down, excuse the language, but this is what happened. Somebody I did not like very much in A.R.E sat down in front of me. And I thought to myself, what an ass, as this person sat down. And as soon as I did that, I looked out at the Giza Plateau and there was Jesus standing there. And he thought back what I had just thought. And his next thought was, more than anything else, you need to work on your thoughts. And that was the end of the dream. And I woke up and I was blown away. I had written out, what do I need to work on spiritually? And from the big guy himself, I got, work on your thoughts. And so from that day forward, I really jumped into dreams. And over again, I have found you can write out a question, get an answer to your question. Or if there's something going on in your life, your dreams will reflect where it's headed. It's nothing set in stone, but it'll give you guidance in terms of what's going on. So again, the Cayce material gives you lots of ways to look for your own guidance and direction. We're wired for guidance.
I think that story is hilarious because
it's true.
It's a bit of the, you think you're so spiritual, you think you're superior, and then you're put into your place by the big guy.
Yeah. Well, after thinking, what an ass. I mean,
yeah. mirroring, as it were.
Yeah,
But at the
absolutely.
same time, it's that compassionate level that you were able to reach about that.
Yeah.
That compassionate understanding that came to you with that energy of the dream. And that's going to stick with me for a while.
Well, and then actually later on I discovered, I think I was a past life dream interpreter because I had some experiences where I mean, in this life I probably interpreted, I'm not kidding, 5 to 10,000 dreams. And I had this experience where I was sitting on the sands of the desert interpreting dreams. People were lining up, and at the end of it, they paid me. I mean, it used to be a paying job. I've never gotten a nickel this time around, but in the past, it was like a job. You would get paid for it. So,
yeah, and so when somebody has that kind of knack for it, it does kind of harken back to the possibility they've had earlier training, as it were.
yeah, and
So,
we take our talents and our trainings and our desires with us like luggage. You know, some of us are carrying on high class Samsonite, and others of us have old paper sacks we probably need to upgrade. But yeah, we carry our talents and our frailties and our biases and our animosities with us until they've been transformed or upgraded.
yeah, and through that upgrade, it's possible in the dreams, it's possible in that living relationship. I was just wondering, in terms of the wisdom of Edgar Cayce, did he talk about not just the idea of the medical, physical energy, and then the dream interpretation and those other aspects, but what about the emotional relationships? Was he able to get into those
Oh,
things?
absolutely. I mean, basically, he suggested that, and this is when I had a challenge with for a while, that every time we have an emotional response to another person, positive or negative, we're having that response because we're seeing a part of ourselves. And that, somebody who we really like and admire, or we see a talent, it's because they're reflecting that same potential we have in us that we could bring out to a greater peace. Conversely, if there's someone who really drives us crazy, we're seeing a part of what other people can see in us. And when I first heard that, I thought, God, this horrible, disgusting thing that I'm seeing in this person at work, it cannot be as prominent in me as it is in that person. But that's not what Cayce said, that if we have a response to it, there's more to work on. And I remember one of my early relationships at a accounting place. I won't give the name. It wasn't in Virginia Beach. I was in this accounting department, and me and this woman had the same job. Basically, we were accounts receivable people. That when people paid the bills, we put them through the system. This is before real computers and stuff, but we had a system. And she and I had the same job, and she made it very clear from early on that she, number one, didn't like me, and number two, that I was crazy. And our desks were right next to each other. And I remember feeling so uncomfortable around her that if I was sitting down and she came in to work to sit by me, it made me more comfortable than if she was sitting there first and I came around to sit by her. So I started going to work early so I didn't have to face that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people in accounting, at least at the time, smoked. And when they smoked, I'd read a book. And I'd have books like Edgar Cayce on this or Edgar Cayce on that. And I remember one time I had brought in one of my Cayce books, and she looked over and she said, and this is an exact quote, "Kevin, do you ever read any nonfiction?" And the more I thought about that, the more angry I became. And one day I'm at home and I'm trying to meditate. And I think I was reading the book, Love is Letting Go of Fear. And it was a great book. And I thought to myself, it's so much easier to be spiritual alone at home with your door closed than it is when you're at this accounting place. So Cayce suggested that if you want to transform a relationship, you need to think of the best possible relationship you can have with that person and give it to them first, because like attracts like. That's the strongest dynamic in interactions with people. And I thought I didn't want anything to do with the word love in it, because that just seemed like that was too big of a stretch for me. I remember having that thought, but I did think I could be her friend. So I thought, well, if I was her friend, I would listen when she talks, because she had this habit of really telling long stories when we were supposed to be working to the other people. So I would stop and listen to her when she tell a long story. And I told the universe, I'm really going to work on this thing. I had thought for a long time she's trying to catch me make a mistake and tell somebody. And I decided, even if I make a mistake, I can fix it. So let's quit worrying about that. And I just went on my way to say good morning to her. And I really tried to create this friend pattern. And I remember thinking, I'm creating this little tiny slide pattern that says friendship. It's glowing, 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 little friendship slide. And I remember having a really good day with her. And I drove home thinking, my God, I've had a healing. We're healing this relationship. And the next day, very next day, I came into work and I was carrying the book, Dr. Ian Stevenson's book, big hardback, 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. And she looked over that book and she said, and I quote, "Why are you reading that trash?" And I ripped my little friendship slide to bits, thinking of all the other things she'd done that irritated me. And like within 10 minutes, she starts talking to me normally again. And I thought, she doesn't understand how she just hurt my feelings. And then I forgave her for hurting my feelings, not on purpose. And I forgave myself for responding so quickly to getting mad. And I kept working at it. And this accounting department had the habit of eating lunch together at a big table. And I left out the part that as soon as I decided to be her friend, the boss had the two of us come in overtime many nights together and weekends. But that went on for a while. So several months working on this. And one Monday I come in and something had happened over the weekend she wanted to tell me about. And she saved the chair next to her at lunch for me because she wanted to talk to me. And I have been back. I passed away now, but I went back to that organization several times and saw her. And I couldn't even remember why she had irritated me so much, because that old pattern was gone. But over and over and over again, I really tried to heal a relationship where I had an immediate dislike of a person, trying to think, okay, there's something here for me to learn and try to work on it. Just to the best. And you can even do it with someone who's dead. I mean, seriously, you can heal a relationship with someone who's dead, because if you don't, the universe is going, if you had a boss you hated, then one day your daughter's going to bring home a fiance that reminds you of that boss. So you're going to have to work on these patterns. Otherwise, the universe in its wisdom is going to find another way to bring them to you.
Yes, it's always about the lesson, it would seem.
It's about the lesson. What I many times I've said, here's one more. I was married once before, and my wife had 2 children from a previous marriage. We were together 6 years. And the youngest one was an 8-year-old who hated me. Hated me. And her father told her she never had to listen to me because I wasn't her father and she needed to do anything I said. And so she'd call me a wimp, 8-year-old. She'd take her shoe and I was trying to write a book and she'd throw it against my door over and over and over again. And I'd open it. Please don't do that. I don't have to do anything you say, my father said. And my wife was not into discipline too much because her first daughter had been an angel and she thought that same approach would work on the second, which it didn't. But anyway, so just one thing after another, I mean, just trying to undermine me every way she could. And I remember one day I went out to my car and I said, God, what am I trying to learn from all this? And a woman's voice whispered in my ear, how to have control of yourself when you have no control over the situation. And I got inspired. I thought, oh my God, what a great way to learn that lesson. At least for 5 minutes, I was inspired. But it was a great response to my really wanting to know, what am I supposed to be learning here? And I have asked that over and over and over again. What am I supposed to be learning from this experience?
Oh, these are great examples. They really are. I think they're going to be very helpful for our viewers because everybody's had those frustrating experiences.
Yeah.
Some have had the opportunity to overcome them, and some are still in that state of needing to overcome. And by applying these spiritual principles to those situations, they can move into a space of self-awareness and self-discipline.
Yeah.
So that they can achieve a level of self-mastery.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of Cayce readings on relationships. And Cayce gave some really helpful points of how to work with our relationships that, people are brought together for a reason. We choose members of our own family before we come in, that there's something we can learn from every individual. And ideally, we all become better people for having had that opportunity. I remember somebody who must have been very left brain asked when Cayce said that, you've been brought with this family to become a better person. And the question was, well, how often does that happen? More than 50% of the time or less than 50% of the time? Because, they apparently were having a lot of challenges. And Cayce responded, if you look at the consciousness of the earth, it's always evolving forward. So more than 50% of the time, it's growing. We're learning our lessons, even though at some times in history, it seems like there's been a back step or something. Even then, we are moving forward somehow and becoming the soul self we're meant to be, our best self. our ideal self.
And that's what it's about, moving more into that pure state, so that we're not just embracing a secular mindset and dealing with this, but we're seeing the sacred connections, that divine flame in another person that you so eloquently stated in your situation with the lady at work. So, you have to do some work. This is not always instantaneous, is a big point for many people, is they think, well, I've been so good. I haven't lost my temper. I haven't gone after them. I haven't, but you have to push beyond those moments where
and I think
not picking up the score.
One of the things that really helped to expand my awareness, I guess would be the right word of saying it, is that when I was manager of conferences, I used to be manager of all our conference programs at A.R.E in Virginia Beach. And very often, most of our, I would say 65% of our conferees are female and 35% male. So very often a woman come to my office and I heard the same story over and over again about relationships. And basically it went something like this. Growing up, I had a very critical parent, could be a mother or father. And I finally got through that. And then I had a very, very critical husband. Constantly, although we were great at the beginning, he criticizes me all the time. Then we had kids. Now my teenagers are constantly criticizing me. And when they got old enough, I went to work. And now oftentimes I'm used at work as an example of someone doing something wrong, being criticized again. I guess this is just my karma. And I remind this person, say, the strongest component of all relationships is like attracts like. And so it seems to me that you have a very low opinion of yourself and you keep attracting people who have the very same opinion until you change your mind. I am a good person. I don't have to put up with this. There's nothing wrong with me. And as you change your mind, the people around you are going to be blown away by that vibration and they're going to have to change their mind as well. So the lesson is not, it's my karma. Karma is basically a fancy word for changing your awareness. Like Casey would say that there's no such thing as karma between people. Karma is only memory. And we have memory in relationship to someone. And the way I explain this oftentimes in audiences is my wife and I have been together for 34 years. And sometimes when I try to tell a story of something that happened years ago, halfway through it, she'll say, that's not the way it happened. I mean, so my memory is not exactly the same as her memory. And karma works the same way, that my memory of that experience, that relationship subconsciously, may not be the same as that other person. So the only thing we have to heal is our own karmic memory. And then we let that other person heal their own karmic memory. So there's not karma between people. There's only memory in association with someone. Well, if the memory I have to heal is my own, that makes it a lot easier than worrying about whether or not that other person is going to come around and change, because I'm the only one that has to change. And that's really why we're here in relationships, to become the best self we can become in order to help the other people that are in our life as well. So.
And do you feel a component of that is releasing having to be right in someone else's eyes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have this, I mean, some might consider it wimping out, I guess, or just folding too early. But a number of years ago, I came up with this, which I try to hold to. I will state my opinion twice in something. And after that, I just let it go. And, I'm not going to try to force my will onto anybody else, but I'll say it twice and then that's it. And, not in I state it strongly, but I'm only going to state it twice,
Well, don't you think part of that is timing?
Yeah, it can be
the intuitive timing. And it's not always about when it's welling up in you the time to share. It's if you're trying to time it for the correct window with another person energetically, so that they can be at their most open or accessible point to take that information, that suggestion, that recommendation on board.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it's full on rejection.
Yeah, and then you just have this tug that goes on and on and on until somebody raises their awareness a little bit.
Yeah. So sometimes it's about letting go of the tug of war rope, and they land on their tuchus, and that's just how it is. So, but you're not going to be in that tension. And it really does remind me of spiritual natural law. as spiritualists, we believe so strongly in utilizing that in our own lives. And a lot of people have heard of the law of attraction, but the reason that the law of attraction works is because of the law of resonance. So that what you resonate with is that what you will attract. And so knowing that we have that also law of personal responsibility, it's up to us to declare how we're going to act and proceed and create that reality of understanding that is happening in that moment. And just because we may know some things on a spiritual level, it doesn't necessarily make us superior in time to lecture these people. We have to hold that and in the right timing. And I think it's so beautiful, the examples you're giving people today. It really is beautiful because it's, I think they can see where they have maybe steered things into the ditch when they didn't mean to.
Yeah, and I think we all make mistakes, and the goal is hopefully you learn from your mistakes, and you don't have to make them again or so frequently. The more you learn, you know.
Yeah. Especially when you've, as you were mentioning earlier, when you understand how to work with a particular person, I like to call them archetypes. When you know how to deal with that particular archetypal situation or person, individual, and then when you come across that, you go, oh, I know, I cracked the code on this one before. I know how I need to react in a spiritual way so that this can unfold wisely and well.
Yeah. You know, I've had other experiences. But I mentioned to you before we started that I've been working at H&R Block during my free time for fun. And there was another experience at another job where I worked for a woman who was a finance director. And both those offices, people had warned me about ahead of time that there was a very strong character there that I probably didn't want to work with. And I went ahead and did it anyway. And yes, the character was strong, but I came to believe that in both cases, they were either somewhat insecure or somewhat fearful of their own position. Mm. And by smothering them with kindness and what do I need, what can I do for you? I turned both those people into like best friends that, you know, they were great to work with. The first case was with this finance director. She used to do inventory on her own, which she hated. And I volunteered to help her. We had to do it at night because this business was open. And she, you know, was so grateful. She paid me for it. But then every time we did inventory, she'd take me out to dinner wherever I wanted to go. So, I mean, we just had the best relationship. And then people couldn't understand why she getting along with someone. But it was just because I did whatever I could to make her feel like I appreciated her and I'm here to help you. And I think sometimes people just need a little love and understanding and they'll be a better person around you.
I think that is absolutely true. You want to treat people the way you would like to be treated. So there's training involved in it, especially if someone's been in a guarded position, that when they've been hurt or they haven't been able to foster a feeling of trust with an individual. And then, you know, someone like Kevin sweeps in.
Well, I don't want anyone to get the impression that, you know, I have messed up more times than there's probably people watching this show. But I think in fact, one thing that this has happened, not anytime recently because I'm too old and worn out for that, but what has happened in the past is I'm having an argument with someone and my subconscious mind will think of something horrible to say to win the argument or really to have my way. And another part of my mind says, would that be something your best self or your soul self would say? And now I will say, you know, that would not. But at the time, a few times I caught myself saying, no, but this is so good. I got to say this anyway. You know, I'd say the mean thing just to win. But that I don't do that anymore. But I'm not perfect now, and I've never been perfect. But I think it's just a matter of trying. Casey would say you get credit for the try.
Good. Get credit for the try.
Credit for the try.
I think a part of that, the reason that is so successful when you have that pause and you, instead of allowing the knee-jerk reaction to happen, you're saying, all right, what would spirit do? Like you're going back into that. Your conscience is speaking to you now. Your soul is speaking to you. And as sensitives, we can become hypersensitive and become sometimes insensitive to others. And that's when we maybe don't use our powers for good like we should. And so with that great power, comes the responsibility to, be gentle in application of these things, because, you could take somebody down at the knees with your words, but do you really want the ramification of that, not just on a karmic level for yourself, but for what it does to them and everybody else that they then connect with, and how that energetically carries forward. So I know
I'm sure you've talked to so many people. You've talked to people who have near-death experiences, and the first roundup is you get to experience everything you've ever done, and then the second fruit on that is you get to experience what you did to other people, how they felt, and you get to have that whole run through. And I'm sure that's challenging.
Yeah,
How
messy reverb of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're connected in ways that we truly, even those of us in the spiritual work, don't understand. I used to tell the staff, we'd have monthly staff meetings that, and I'm sure that some of them, their eyes would glaze over when I'd say it so many times. I'd say, we are employees for God. And I'm not talking about just people in this room. I'm talking about the whole world. Our job is to bring spirit into the earth. That's why we're here. A lot of people say, I hope this is my last lifetime. I'm getting out. That's not why we're here. We're not here to get out of the earth. We're here to bring spirit into the earth. And unfortunately, even though we're all employees for God, most people don't know they were hired for that position. And even those of us who do know are usually only working part-time. So we're not always in sync with what we're supposed to be about. And the more we can get in sync with that, the more I think we can help transform our own life and the world around us, and really do what we came here to do, which is bring the spiritual nature of the Creator into the earth.
And such a beautiful message, intention, and practice. And here we are talking about these things in theory, but there is an encouragement for you and me and everyone else to put that in the true application. And it starts in those everyday interactions we have with others, to really seek to connect on a soul level with them, and to use our intuition to say, how could we move this into a state of grace? How can we transcend whatever this moment is? And sometimes people want peace so much they will subjugate themselves to another person's will, as it were. Right?
I'm not sure that's not the best.
Sometimes they're in the people-pleasing mode because they don't want to have any of the friction. But this puts it in a different frame, that we have to say, we can lovingly and firmly deal with what's in our life without having to be right in a discussion. But there's an energetic shift. Wouldn't you say there's an energetic shift that starts to happen? Absolutely. That you're not just going to give way for the sake of giving way. You're giving over to the process that's happening between you and that individual or that situation, so that you can see the higher power at work. And sometimes it takes effort, like as you're describing, these are things you applied over time. Yeah. you wore with erosion.
Worn down, and I got to try a different approach. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So you have to remain adaptable and look for the good and feel that divine hunch, that intuitive lead of how you need to follow up with an individual, so that you can crack the code.
And like I'm sure you've experienced before, the more you're open to being led or guided, or really wanting to put your best self forward to help somebody, I think the more often intuition comes to the forefront to try to help you.
Yeah.
I used to, all these times I've spoken on dream interpretation at local high schools, one of those psychology teachers became vice president of a school. And this was the year just before COVID hit. So they were doing a field day, and they had 400 students in the high school. They only had room for 200 out in the field day. And then they had the other 200 to go into a lecture and then going to lunch. So it's split in half days. So he called me and said, could I do 200 people at a time doing a dream talk, and then switch them off. And, teenagers are not always that interested in whatever you're going to do, but I committed. So I did. I went to this thing, and I had 200 students sitting there, and I gave what I thought was a pretty interesting talk about dreams. And, I had some attention, but it wasn't like, hooray, we love this talk. And so I said, when we had maybe 20 minutes ago, I said, does anyone want to tell me a dream? I have 200 students there. And finally, 3 kids raised their hand. And I picked the one closest to me so I could hear him, because a big auditorium. And this was his dream. He dreamed that he was on this little island, and there were several other islands around. And every time he tried to go to a different island, all these piranha fish would jump out of the water trying to bite his feet. And so he felt stuck. He couldn't do anything because all these piranhas are coming after him. And he became very depressed. And it was only when he saw his kitten swimming up to the island and the piranha fish are leaving that kitten alone that he got some semblance of relief. And I said, do you feel like, your feet are your direction, and a piranha with sharp teeth are critical words. I said, do you feel like every time you want to do something, your parents criticize you so you can't do anything at all? And the only solace you get is from your cat at home? And he said, as loud as you can imagine, my God, that's exactly right. And so when I next said, does anyone have a dream? About 150 hands went up. They all wanted to have a dream. So, I think you have to put yourself out there to try to be helpful. And if you can do it, you can help more people. It's amazing how it works.
Yeah, amazing. That's fantastic. And sometimes people are not brave enough to raise their hand. But then once they see the result, the gift that you can give them, things change. And I feel that your work is so beautiful, and I'm glad that you continue to bring Edgar Cayce to light for so many people.
Absolutely.
You've given us some great nuggets today that I could tell people really appreciate the discussion in the comments. Very powerful discussion. And I know our time is coming to an end for this episode, but I was just hoping you could explain a little bit about your upcoming classes here in Lilydale.
Sure.
You're going to be here to teach on August 22nd and August 23rd. You have expanding your consciousness with the Edgar Cayce material on August 22nd. And just if you want to just say.
Sure. So what I'm going to do on the 22nd is I'm going to give people an overview of how my consciousness changed over time through the Cayce material, and giving maybe the 8 to 12 major topics that really transform me, and invite them to see how they could do that in their own lives. So that's the night talk. And then the next talk is going to be very experiential, where we're going to go through everything from how to work with telepathy and remote viewing, to have experiences with clairvoyance, to play that game I play with my wife in the auto dealership, to talking to divas, experiences I've had talking to divas and elementals and little fairies out in the yard. Mm-hmm. All of those kinds of, we're going to talk about how you can do that in your own life. And actually, just to remind me of a quick story, I did a intuition program over 5 weeks to 300 Japanese people on Zoom in Japan. And I talked to them about how you can talk to animals, and every day how you could tune into your animal, talk to the animal. And there's one Japanese woman who didn't speak English. It had to be translated for me. She had tried this several days with her kitten, and she explained how her kitten be sleeping there, and every day she'd do what we had talked about. And she said on day number 3, she's doing it. And the kitten, she said, she looked up and she heard the kitten say, and I quote, "What are you doing? I'm trying to sleep." So I thought that was hysterical. But so we're going to do stuff like that. We'll give people experiences firsthand with intuition.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm glad you shared that story. And then on August 23rd, that's a big, long day for you.
Yeah, we're going to have a panel discussion with Greg Unterberger and other people about questions from the audience about Edgar Cayce, I think.
But Edgar Cayce, and it'll be Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet, a panel discussion with Kevin. And that'll be great for people to have that kind of feeling of the Q&A with through that, and get some more of their questions answered. So we're so excited that you're coming to Lilydale.
I'm excited to be there. I've known people from Lilydale for years. I've never actually been there, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So we're so thankful that you're coming, and thank you so much for coming on today's show to share with us about Edgar Cayce, so that people can get excited. And where can they find more information about you, Kevin?
If they just go to Kevin Todeschi, oneword.com, I have a blog I do every month or two. So there's probably 25 up there. It has my schedule of programs coming up. It has some of the books I've written there they can link to, so they can find out more information there.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you again for being on the show today. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. And for those of you who catch the replay, I'll see you next week for another Wednesdays with Willa. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.